She didn't choose to be born. She didn't choose to be traded. She didn't choose the tower, the witch, or the silence that swallowed her whole. But here's what nobody tells you about a girl who grows up alone in the dark. She learns things about patience, about survival, about what she's actually made of. And the day she finally decided she was done being someone's prisoner. Yeah, nothing could stop her. Not even the woman who stole her life. Let's talk about what it feels like to be a bargain. Not a person. A bargain. A transaction completed before you ever took your first breath. A debt your parents made and you had to pay. With your entire childhood, your freedom, your name. That's what Elara was. And she didn't even know it. There was a couple living on the edge of a small town in Vermont. Young. In love. Building a quiet life together near the forest, where the trees grew so tall, they blocked out the afternoon sun. And for years, they had one prayer, one wish that sat between them at every dinner table, every quiet evening, every moment that should have felt complete, but somehow didn't. A baby. Finally. It looked like that prayer was about to be answered. Their house was small, but warm, and right outside their back window sat a garden that didn't belong to them. It belonged to the woman next door, the one the whole neighborhood low-key avoided, without ever explaining why. You just knew. The way you know some doors shouldn't be opened. The way your body moves away from certain things before your brain catches up. Her name was Dame Gothel, and that garden of hers, straight up breathtaking. Flowers so vivid they looked unreal. Herbs that smelled like something ancient. Greens so lush they almost glowed. One plant in particular caught the pregnant woman's eye. Elara herb, fresh and bright, and somehow more alive than everything around it. And something shifted inside her. Not just a craving, something deeper. Something that wrapped around her ribs and wouldn't let go. She stopped eating. Stopped sleeping, just stood at that window, staring, getting paler and thinner every single day. Her husband watched her disappear in front of him and was absolutely terrified. "Tell me what's wrong," he said. She looked at him with hollow eyes and said, "If I don't get some of that plant, I think I'll die." Dramatic? Honestly, yes. But fear does something to people who love each other, makes them do things they'd never do otherwise. So that evening, when the sun went down and the street was empty, he climbed the wall. He grabbed a handful of the herb and ran back. His wife ate it like she'd been starving for weeks. And for one brief, beautiful moment, she looked like herself again. But the next morning, the craving came back. Stronger. So he climbed again, and this time, Dame Gothel was waiting in the dark. She didn't scream, didn't call anyone, just stood there with her arms crossed and her eyes locked on him, like she'd been expecting this exact moment. "You dare steal from me," she said. Quiet, that specific quiet that's scarier than shouting. He dropped to his knees, told her everything. The pregnancy, the craving, the desperation, begged for mercy with his whole body. Gothel looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she said, "Take the herb, all of it, but when your wife gives birth, the child comes to me." He should have said no. He should have stood up and walked away and found another way. But fear had already made the decision for him. He said yes, and when his daughter was born, Dame Gothel was at the door before the sun came up. She named the baby Elara, and she took her home. Elara grew up next level beautiful, golden hair that fell in waves, warm eyes that saw everything, a voice that could straight up stop the world mid-spin. She was curious and creative and full of a life that nobody around her was interested in. Because by the time she was 12 years old, Gothel had moved her into a tower No stairs, no door, no way in, no way out. Just one small window at the very top of the stone, and Elara's hair, which by now fell all the way to the ground like a rope of spun gold. Every single day, Dame Gothel stood at the base of the tower and called up, "Elara, Elara, let down your hair." And Elara would wind her braids around the window hook and let them fall, and Gothel would climb, and they would sit together in that tower, Gothel talking, Elara listening, and then Gothel would climb back down, and Elara would be alone again. That was life, day after day after day after day. Can you imagine what that does to a person? Not chains, not darkness, just sameness, silence, the slow erasure of believing anything else is possible. If you'd been locked in a tower since you were 12, would you still find a reason to sing? Elara did, every single day, without fail. She sang because the songs were hers, completely, unquestionably hers, and Gothel couldn't take them. They filled the tower, floated out the window, drifted down through the Vermont forest like something looking for someone to find them. And one afternoon, someone did. But then, one evening, everything changed. His name was Eli, a young man from a nearby town. Kind, restless, total I took the long way home again vibes. He was riding through the forest when the singing reached him. He pulled his horse to a stop, stood completely still. What is that? Not a question, just pure, immediate recognition of something extraordinary. He searched the whole base of the tower. No door, no entry, no explanation. He rode home that night, genuinely unsettled, low-key unable to think about anything else. He came back the next day, and the day after. And one evening, he saw Gothel arrive. He pressed himself behind a tree and watched her stand at the base of the tower and call out those words, watched the golden rope fall, watched the old woman climb. He stared at it for a long time. Then a slow, quiet smile crossed his face. Yeah, he had a plan. The next evening, as the last light left the sky, he stood at the base of the tower, took one breath, called up, "Elara, Elara, let down your hair." Silence, long enough that he thought it hadn't worked. Then the golden rope fell. He climbed. Elara turned around and saw him, and every muscle in her body locked. Not Gothel, a stranger, a boy, standing in her tower, looking just as stunned as she was. Both of them completely frozen, staring at each other, like neither one could believe the other was real. But he wasn't threatening. He sat down on the floor, right there, cross-legged like it was the most normal thing, and just talked to her, like a person, like she was a person. He asked her questions, and then actually waited for the answers. He told her about the outside world, not to impress her, just because she'd never seen it. He listened when she spoke, like what she said genuinely mattered to him. Elara had never experienced anything like it in her entire life. Total, oh, this is what being seen feels like vibes, and something in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years, quietly came undone. He came back every evening after that, always after dark, always careful. And slowly, between them, a plan took shape. "Bring me silk thread," Elara said one night. "Every time you come, I'll weave it into a ladder. When it's long enough, I climb down and I leave." Crystal clear. That was the plan. If Elara's story is hitting different, hit that like. It means the world. They were careful, so careful. Weeks of evenings, thread by thread, the ladder growing longer. But then, Elara made one careless mistake. One afternoon, without thinking, she said to Gothel, "It's so strange. You're so much heavier to pull up than Eli is." The words were out before she heard them. Silence fell like a blade. Gothel's face went absolutely still. The kind of still that happens right before something irreversible. "What?" she said. Not a question. A sentence with no room in it. Elara opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Gothel moved. She grabbed the golden braids, years of hair, years of growth, wrapped them around her fist, and picked up the scissors from her bag with her other hand. Snip. The braids hit the floor. Elara didn't even have time to understand what had happened. That same night, Gothel drove her out to a remote stretch of open land. Nowhere she recognized, nowhere near any road or town or person. No phone, no supplies, nothing. "Stay here," Gothel said, and drove away without looking back. The darkness that followed was the kind that has no bottom, not the darkness of the tower. At least the tower had walls, had shape, had a window she could look out of. This was open and formless and completely indifferent to her. Nobody came, not one person. The world just kept going without her. Elara sat on the ground in the middle of nowhere and felt the full weight of 18 years crash down on her at once. No ladder, no plan, no Eli, no anything. Just her, and the silence. And then, after a long time sitting with all of that, she stood up. Because what else do you do? She found water, found food, built something that functioned as shelter, figured out each problem as it came, one at a time, the way you do when there's no one else to figure it out for you. And she sang, every day, not for Eli, not to be found, just to remind herself that she was still here, still whole, still, somehow, herself. Back at the tower, Gothel attached the cut braids to the window hook and waited. When Eli arrived and called up, "Elara, Elara, let down your hair." The rope fell. He climbed, and at the top. Gothel looked back at him with cold, satisfied eyes. "She's gone," she said, "and you will never find her." The ground came up fast. He survived. But when he opened his eyes, everything was black. The fall, the thorns, the shock of impact. His vision was completely, totally gone. Yeah, just like that. He wandered for months, blind, moving by sound and instinct and sheer refusal to stop, calling her name into forests that didn't answer, eating whatever his hands found, sleeping wherever the ground led him, straight up lost in every possible way. And then one morning, a sound, a voice. It hit him somewhere behind his ribs before his mind even processed it. Familiar in the way that home is familiar, in the way that certain things bypass your brain entirely and go straight to something older. He turned toward it. Eli. She saw him first. She was already running. When she reached him, she took his face in both hands and looked at him. Really looked. And everything she'd been holding together alone for months just broke open. She cried the way people cry when they've been strong for too long, and finally don't have to be. Her tears fell onto his eyes, and the darkness. Slowly, impossibly, like the first light after the longest night, began to lift. He blinked, looked at her. She was different. The girl he remembered had been curious and bright and full of wonder. This person standing in front of him had all of that and something else underneath it, something forged, something that had been tested in ways he hadn't been there to see and had come through anyway. He thought she was the most extraordinary person he had ever encountered. "I looked for you," he said. His voice was rough. "Every single day." She looked at him steadily. "I know," she said. "I never stopped singing." They walked out of that wilderness together, not toward a palace, not toward anything grand, just toward people, toward warmth, toward a world that had kept moving while they were lost in the dark, and that was ready now to receive them back. Dame Gothel was never seen again. The tower stood empty for a season, and then came down in a storm. Nobody mourned it. And Elara? She kept singing. Every day. Not because she needed to be found, not because the silence was unbearable, but because somewhere in the months she'd spent alone in the wilderness, she had understood something clearly. The voice was hers. It had always been hers. No tower built around her, no scissors taken to her, no cold woman with cold eyes and a heart full of control. None of it had ever touched what was actually hers, and nothing ever would. Drop a comment below and tell me. Was it when Elara stood up alone in the middle of nowhere and decided to survive anyway? Or when Eli heard her voice from across the forest and his whole body recognized her before his mind did? I read every single comment. If Elara's story touched your heart, give this video a like. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss one. Until next time, remember, everything can be taken from you. Everything except who you actually are. Hold on to that. It's the only thing that was ever truly yours. Let me know if you want any further tweaks.